Morning everyone. So we have a special visitor today who is in a funny mood. I don't know why, but she is. We are starting book 3 of Wizards of Wands. This is called Knock 3 Times. This is going to be spectacularly difficult with this one here. She will probably go, but I don't know at what point. So here we go. Awfully sorry. When this gets animated, this one will probably leave. So, a long time ago, this is a little note from just at the front of the book, so I'll have to read this. A long time ago, a young girl exploring the back of a cave somewhere in the British Isles discovered these papers known as the Wizard Book. Hidden behind a large stone, nobody's ever been able to read them, for they were written so very far away in the distant past that they used a vocabulary and a script that has never been seen before. I've spent many happy years translating the papers of Hiccup the Viking from Old Norse into English, so I was excited to accept this even greater challenge, for these wizard books were written in such a dark age that the language they use has been completely lost to us over the years. After many years of study, I have finally cracked the code of this lost language, and in doing so I have uncovered something truly extraordinary. Believe the unbelievable. Every fairy story you have read has its basis in some truth. It was not only dragons living in the distant darkness. Dragons were only a very, very small part of it. This was a time of magic. The prologue. Once there were wildwoods. The wizards had lived in the wildwoods for as long as anyone could remember, and they were intending to live there forever, along with all the other magic things, until the warriors came. The warriors invaded from across the seas, and although they had no magic, they brought a new weapon that they called iron. And iron was the only thing that magic would not work on. From that moment on, wizards and warriors were fighting each other to the death in the wildwoods, until one day a young warrior called Queen Sycorax fell in love with a young wizard king called Encanso. Wizards and warriors should never fall in love. So Sycorax had taken the spell of love denied to make her love die. And the love had died indeed, and Sycorax had married a warrior like she was supposed to. And Encanso had married a wizard, just as wizards should. So the danger of a curse ought to have been avoided. But 13 years ago, Sycorax had a daughter whose name was Wish. And Wish had a terrible secret. The lingering true love kiss of the wizard Encanso had made Queen Sycorax's daughter magic. And for the first time in human history, Wish had a magic that works on iron. And 13 years ago, Encanso had a son whose name was Zar. And Zar had a terrible secret. Zar had stolen some magic from a witch, and the stain of the witch magic was beginning to control him. This is the story of how Zar and Wish met, and how they made friends, even though they had been brought up to hate each other like poison. Wish and Zar have run away from their parents, searching for the ingredients, for a spell to get rid of witches. They are outcasts, not cats, hunted by wizards and warriors alike, and for something far, far worse, witches. Witches must never get hold of magic that works on iron. But, oh, this dog. Twice, Wish and Zar have escaped the talons of witches. Twice they have cheated death. Can they be third time lucky? Now remember, I am a character in this story who sees everything, knows everything. I will not tell you who I am, but have you guessed yet? Part 1, Forest on Fire. Chapter 1, Betrayed. So, can you remember that the last book, they've escaped from the Midnight Eve party, where Queen Sycorax and the wizard Encanso are dancing, and Zar and Wish have escaped. 3,000 years ago, at the end of the era that would be known as the Bronze Age, the whole of the British Isles was covered in wildwoods. Good things lived in the wild woods, animals and magic creatures, and humans who minded their own business. But bad things lived there at that time too, some very bad things. Two of these bad things were flying above the forest even now. The bad things were presently invisible, but if human eyes could have seen them, they would have noticed that they had soft black wings, like the wings of crows, and fingers that ended in talons like a bird of prey, and noses a little bit like a beak. In fact, they were witches. Not good witches, but very bad witches indeed. And they were flying high, just below the clouds, and as they flew, they were watching something down below. The something was a door. But instead of being a door where a door really ought to be, vertically opening and shutting between rooms that are safely on the ground in an orderly kind of way, this particular door was flying through the air, flat on its front like a carpet, just above the treetops. It was the little moving speck of the flying door that had first attracted the witches' attention as they flew with lazy wing beats in the strong currents of air high above the trees, on their way back to their nests in the Lachrymose Mountains. But it wasn't the door itself that was now holding their scrutiny. There were 3 children lying on their stomachs on top of the door. The invisible witches looked down at the children, and the children looked down over the edge of the flying door, looking for something in the forest. The witches were hungry, so hungry that long dribbles of black saliva were dripping from their lips. They hadn't seen anything so delicious as these children in weeks, no, perhaps even years, and that will give you an idea why people didn't really like witches, either in the Bronze Age or any other age that the witches happened to turn up in. But something was making those witches pause before swooping on their tasty, unaware little morsels below and fastening their claws into them. "La si tig nog tau ere," whined Breakneck, waggling her nose from side to side. "Yue si yudom gidding toy od yao kneti glug eba pa." Rip Grizzle was pausing too, although the smell of the blood of the human children, which to a witch is as delicious as that of a cake baking in the oven. Now, I'm just going to pause there because, as you may remember, witches speak backwards. So I will now translate to you what those witches were just saying. So what they were actually saying were, what is it doing out here? Why is nobody protecting it? Do you think this could be a trap? He was desperate, so going back, Rip Grizzle was pausing too, although the smell of the blood of the human children, which to a witch is as delicious as that of a cake baking in the oven, was wafting up to him and making him drool like a dog. He was desperate to snatch the treats from under Breakneck's waggling nose and fly back to his nest to feed on the tender darlings all by himself. But he was too cautious. Before the return of the witches to the wild woods, the air would have been full of flying things, birds and sprites and cockatrices, dragons, piskies, all manner of glorious magical creatures. But now, this early in the morning, which was too close to the night hours of the witching time, the forest was quiet as death, and the warrior humans kept their babies locked up safe in their castles, and the wizard humans kept their babies safe in their treehouse forts. So what were these humans doing then, flying, cool as you like, on the back of a magical flying door, miles and miles away from any human habitation? Perhaps Breakneck was right. Maybe it was actually a trap. The children were talking to one another, and one of them was singing rather shakily with false bravery, "No fear, that's the warrior's marching song. No fear, we sing it as we march along." Rip Grizzle's gigantic ears curled up at the edges, swivelling and tilting around towards the child in order to catch the sound. The eye in the middle of his forehead opened up sleepily. The 2 witches flew unseen lower and lower to listen to the children's conversation. The first young person was a wizard boy called Zar. His name was pronounced Zar. I don't know why, spelling is weird. The witches did not know it, but Zar was the son of Encanso, king of wizards, and Tsar had a very dangerous secret, which was that he had stolen some magic from a witch and was having trouble controlling it. The witch magic was hidden below a glove and a cut on his right hand, but the witches could smell it nonetheless, and the smell confused them. The second was a warrior princess called Wish, daughter of Sycorax, queen of the warriors, and Wish too had a very dangerous secret, which was that beneath her eye patch she had a magic eye. And warriors, as we know, were not supposed to have any magic at all. The third was a warrior boy called Bodkin. Bodkin was Wish's assistant bodyguard, and he was finding this position really rather testing, because he didn't like fighting very much. He had an unfortunate tendency to fall asleep in situations of physical danger, and trying to control the uncontrollable little princess was an absolutely impossible task, because she seemed to have absolutely no idea what rules were at all. Bodkin was the one singing that song rather unconvincingly. The three children were looking rather more ragged and sad than they had been 2 weeks earlier, when they had run away from Wish's and Tsar's parents. They had started out joyously in the way that these journeys often begin. Running away had seemed like it would be an exciting adventure, but now they were hungry and tired and frightened, for they knew they were being hunted by the warriors and the wizards and the witches, and that they must never be caught. If the warriors caught them, Sycorax would lock up Wish in Iron Warrior Fort, where the witches could not get hold of her. If the wizards caught them, Encanso would lock up Tsar in the prison of Gormancrag, where his witch stain could be treated. And if the witches caught them, well, that was such a scary idea. Our heroes were trying their hardest not to think about it. So for the past 2 days they had been looking for the house of the sister of Caliburn, Tsar's talking raven, where they hoped to be able to hide. "I know my sister lives somewhere around here," said Caliburn for the umpteenth time. "She moved here a while back when I was still a human." Caliburn was actually a wizard who had lived many lifetimes, and in the previous one he had indeed been a human. And he hadn't been just any old human either. He had been the great wizard Pentaglion. Unfortunately, Caliburn had come down in the world and returned to the wild woods in this present lifetime in the form of a bird, a rather untidy bird, for Caliburn was continually losing his feathers in his anxiety at the impossible task of trying to keep Tsar out of trouble. "I know that my sister has one of the ingredients we need for the spell to get rid of witches, the tears of the Druid, and maybe we can persuade her to give it to us," said Caliburn, "and she'll give us a bed for the night and a good meal, and she'll protect us for a while." None of them were feeling very strong at all, and the idea of a bed for a night and a good meal was even more attractive than the idea of that Caliburn's sister might give them one of the ingredients they needed for their quest. In fact, it brought tears to Bodkin's eyes. "What does your sister's house look like, Caliburn?" asked Bodkin. Caliburn looked a little bit shifty. "Oh, just like any other old human habitation. I haven't been there in years. I'll know when I see it." "Your sister must have a very big house," said Wish doubtfully. "Look how many of us there are. Are you quite sure she'll want to have any of us to stay at all?" Caliburn gave an airy wave of his wing. "Oh, my sister has loads of room. Of course she'll have us all to stay." "Even though we're all a bit odd," said Wish. "I can't believe that your sister won't mind about us being, wizards and warriors working together, Caliburn. Everyone else hates us, and some people even might say that we were sort of cursed." Wish was a little odd-looking, a funny little scrawny kind of girl, with hair so quivering with magic that it vibrated and lifted with such static electricity every time she moved. She had a pale little face that looked as if the tide had washed over it and taken away all the sharp bits, and a kind but determined expression. That determination of hers was being severely tested, though. Her armour was dented, she hadn't eaten in 3 days, and her face and hands and legs were deeply scratched from a terrible battle they had had a week ago when they were ambushed by wyverns, which are a type of dragon very common in the Bronze Age period. With all her heart, Wish wanted to believe that Caliburn had a sister who would welcome them, even though they were outlaws disobeying the laws of the Wildwood universe. But deep down, she had a hollow feeling that this was very, very unlikely. "Let's face it, Caliburn," said Wish, trying to be practical and not mind too much. "We don't really fit in anywhere. No one is going to want us." "My sister isn't as prejudiced as everyone else," said Caliburn. "There are kind people in the world. You just have to find them." "You're quite sure..." Sorry. "You're quite sure your sister hasn't died and come back as a raven too, and the reason we can't find her house is that she's now living in some sort of nest?" said Bodkin. No, said Caliburn. And then less certainly, "Well, probably not." Bodkin didn't know quite how to say this without hurting Caliburn's feeling, but then they had been searching for Caliburn's sister's house for quite a while now without finding any sign of it. "Are you quite sure that you've got this right, Caliburn?" asked Bodkin. "You've only just remembered that you have a sister." "Living many lifetimes is difficult," said Caliburn, rather flustered. "It takes a while to remember what happened in the previous ones, but now my memory has been jogged. I know I have a sister, and she's down in that forest somewhere down there." "Well, I think we should give up looking for your sister and march right into that Druid stronghold on the Lake of the Lost, and just take their tears from them," said Czar, who was not a patient person. "You don't understand," said Caliburn. "The Druids are unrelenting, unforgiving, and the greatest wizards in the Wildwoods, and they really don't like having their tears taken. They'll kill us if they catch us. Much easier for my sister just to give them to us." And then Wish spotted something that wasn't the welcoming fires of Caliburn's sister's house, but something much more sinister. "Some people are following us down there in the forest," whispered Wish, putting her eye patch a smidgen up because she could see better through her magic eye. Sure enough, down in the tangle of green woods below them, way in the distance, there were little flickering lights of many, many torches coming through the trees in the direction. "Do you think it could be your sister, Caliburn?" Zar whispered, hopefully, his tummy giving the most gigantic rumble. Only Zar could mistake the ominous torches of what was clearly a hunting party for a welcoming greeting from Caliburn's sister. But then Zar was an optimistic sort of person who hoped for the best of all times. He had a deep cut over his right temple from where a wyvern had earlier tried to take his eye out, and an old bit of shirt wrapped round his leg covering a wound from a boggart bite that was going septic. But he wasn't going to let little things like those get him down. Zar was a happy-go-lucky sort of boy with a wide-awake look in his eyes that suggested that he was determined to enjoy life, despite unimportant details like infected boggart bites and wyvern injuries. As Zar was also a boy of considerable charm and charisma, he had lots of companions, and flying with the door were 6 of his sprites and 3 hairy fairies. These tiny little insecty creatures, so paper thin you could see their hearts, were buzzing around in a state of such alarm that blue electric sparks were coming out of their ears. "Beware!" they hissed. "Beware, beware, beware!" "Nope, definitely not my sister," said Caliburn, shading a wing over his eyes and squinting so he could see better. "They're banging war drums. My sister wouldn't bang war drums unless she's changed a very good deal in the last 20 years. "Don't worry, sprites," said Zar soothingly, for although Zar often led his companions into difficulty, he did take his responsibilities as the leader of his band very seriously. "I'll look after you." "Of course you will, master," squeaked Squeeze-Juice, one of the smallest and most enthusiastic of the hairy fairies. "You is the most brilliantest leader in the whole wildest world, and you would never lead us into troubles." "But I don't understand that," said Wish. "Nobody knows which way we went. The sprites have dimmed their lights. We're flying so close to the tops of the trees that nobody can see us from below, so how can they be following us?" "Maybe they picked up the scent of Crusher and the Snowcats," squealed Bodkin. Zar had other companions too, and they were down on the ground, a giant called Crusher, 3 beautiful snowcats, wolves, a bear, and a werewolf called Lonesome were following on foot way below on the forest floor. "Impossible," whispered Tsar. "I'm unbeatable at running away, and so are my companions. We're completely untrackable. As well as being just a trifle conceited, Tsar was very good indeed at running away. He was the most disobedient boy in the wizard kingdom, always getting into trouble for doing things like getting his sprites to charm his older brother Luther's spelling staff so that every time Luther tried to use them, they spanked him on the bum, painting spots on the magic mirror in the main hall so everyone who looked in it thought they were coming down with something infectious, pouring animation potion on the trousers of Ranta, his least favourite teacher, so whenever Ranta tried to put them on, the trousers skipped out of reach. As a result, Tsar had spent his entire short life running away from the wrath of his father, his teachers and other wizards, so he had become something of a running away expert. "Maybe somebody else has betrayed us," hissed Tiffenstorm, one of Tsar's larger sprites, eyes narrowing jealously. "Probably that werewolf. Never trust a werewolf who you met in prison. That's good advice, kids. Don't you dare accuse that werewolf just because he's a werewolf," said Tsar. Wish agreed with Tsar. "Nobody's betrayed us," said Wish. "We're on the same side now, Tiffenstorm. We're all outlaws together, remember?" "But who is chasing us down there in the forest?" worried Wish. Caliburn began to list the enemies. Well, could be the Druids, Tsar's father, Wish's mother. What about the Witch Smeller? He hates you. Or the Warrior Emperor? He'll want to get rid of magic that works on iron at all costs. Squeeze Juice bared his little teeth and squeaked, "Ours is get rid of them for you, master. Ours is by get chunks out of their legs and their bottoms. Ours is make their noses drips for weeks and ties knots in their sandwiches. Ours is make holes in their socks so they keeps putting these big toes through the wrong ones. Really annoying way. Ours is put itching powders in these knickers, and ours is leave fluff balls in these tummy buttons, and they'll never knows whence the fluff is coming from." As Squeeze Juice was not a great deal bigger than a dormouse, and the threat of fluff in the tummy button was not exactly life-threatening, none of this was likely to be terribly worrying to a Druid or a heavily armed iron warrior. But Tsar thanked him solemnly and said, "Yes, of course you can, Squeeze Juice, just as soon as I give the order." The one enemy that Caliburn did not mention was witches, which, given that there were 2 very large witches hovering right above their heads at that very moment, was a tiny bit ironic. There were even rather a large clue that witches were closer than they might realise. Around Tsar's waist, attached to his belt, hung 2 witch feathers, and when witches were close, these witch feathers burned green with a strange, unnatural light. They were burning green now. My goodness, they were greener than emerald, brighter than starlight, but Tsar, Wish and Bodkin had not noticed. So intent were they on staring down at what was going on in the forest below them. The only person who had noticed the glowing of the witch feathers was the baby. The baby was the smallest hairy fairy of them all, and he was going wild with agitation. But the baby was still in his egg, and he could only say one word: goo. And nobody listens to babies, even when they have something very important to say. So although the baby was rolling around urgently in his egg, bumping into people and going goo, 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 goo at the top of his baby voice, none of the other sprites would listen, and Tsar just battered him away, saying, "Not now, baby, not now." The witches, sharpening their talons and hovering not more than 10 feet above the door, grinned at each other. Nasty grins. For witches have nasty senses of humour. How amusing. These children were so busy worrying about the dangers from below, they were completely ignoring the much more serious danger threatening them from above. Sorry, doggle. And they were running away from their parents. That would explain why they were out at night, so far away from their tribes and their kinsmen. It wasn't a trap at all. The witches prepared to swoop. But then the witches stiffened as something poked out of the back of Wish's waistcoat, swiveling, as if sniffing the air, and then hopping up on top of Wish's head to peer over the edge of the door with the others. The something was a spoon, and it happened to be enchanted. The enchanted spoon was followed by a key, and a fork, and a number of little pins. None of this was odd to the witches. Enchanted objects was perfectly normal back in those days. But these enchanted objects weren't normal at all. They were very odd indeed. These enchanted objects were made of iron. The witch's eyes blazed red and visible for one horrified moment. "It's her!" hissed the witches. "It's her!" They growled like dogs. "The girl with the magic eye who has magic objects on iron!" "It's an unusual coincidence," Wish, peering downwards, also whispered under her breath at the very same time as her witches. "It's her, it's her, it's her, it's her, it's her, it's her! It's my mother!" cried Wish. "That's who's following us! Okay, nobody panic! Stick arm key, cut your hope into the keyhole for me, please." When Wish wanted to fly the door as quickly as possible, she needed the key to be in the keyhole so that she could steer the door at speed. "Of course," boasted the key in a creaky little voice. "You see, spoon, the fork is a mere food carrier, pathetic little potato peter. But I, the key, important role, very important role." The key and the fork were both in love with the enchanted spoon, so the key never lost an opportunity to show off. The fork waggled its prongs furiously at the key, and the key stuck out its iron chest and hopped self-importantly into the keyhole. "We'll just very quietly sneak away," said Wish. "Softly, everybody, make as little noise as you can." But before Wish could move the key and send the door skimming silently away across the tree tops, she noticed something very odd was up with Squeeze Juice. He had been getting thoroughly overexcited, doing somersaults in the air, squeaking dire threats about making holes in people's socks and protecting Zar, and accidentally biting his own tail, and at the sighting of Wish, his mother, he seemed to completely lose it. His little bumbly's body shot fizzily with sparks. His spotty eyes lit up, a luminous bright green, and he shrieked at the top of his voice, "Sussex to the rescue! Charge!" And the little sprite threw himself in a mad, zooming dive downwards in a lunatic one-hairy fairy attack on Queen Sycorax's entire advancing army. "What is he doing?" gasped Zar. And just as the goggle-eyed children on the back of the door were taking the first incomprehensible disaster, a second one sprang up, bright, fierce, flaming, in front of their very eyes. "My mother!" cried Wish. "She's setting the forest alight!" And we're leaving it there. Both myself and little doggo here, who clearly was not impressed with that story, will see you tomorrow. Goodbye.